Over the last 40 years, public REITs have outperformed the broader S&P 500. They've also outperformed over 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. And you would think that they've done this by taking on more risk, but the reality is that REITs actually display lower risk characteristics. And fundamentally, a REIT behaves somewhere between a bond and an equity. The underlying leases in the properties that they own act more like bonds. The physical real estate appreciates and acts more like an equity. And so you would expect that the returns would fall somewhere between bonds and equity. Certainly the risk does. That's not the case though. They've actually done far better than the equity positions in the S&P 500. And the question is, why do REITs outperform the S&P 500, and will they continue to do that? I believe they will, and they have major structural advantages. The first advantage that they have is that they are not subject to corporate taxation, which means that every dollar that flows up to the REIT flows out to the investor. In fact, a REIT is required by law to pay out 90% of its income to its shareholders. A C Corp, on the other hand, like an Amazon or other companies, when capital comes up to the parent company, they can decide whether to reinvest that money, but certainly any income is taxed at the government level. So when a REIT is competing against the company in the S&P 500, that S&P 500 company has to earn 20% more in income to pay the exact same distribution to shareholders, and it's not even required to pay distributions to shareholders. The second point, which I think gives REITs a distinct advantage, is the fact that real estate always has intrinsic value. When a company goes out of business, there's nothing left. The shareholders have nothing to go after. Sometimes the creditors do. Real estate really never becomes worthless. There's always an intrinsic value. When a company leaves a piece of real estate or goes bankrupt and they occupy a piece of real estate, the real estate itself continues to have value, which inherently creates downside protection for these assets. The third advantage that REITs enjoy are that they own properties that have stable and predictable cash flow streams. And those cash flow streams allow REITs to pay a very healthy and high dividend yield. The dividend yield of the REIT index is in fact about double that of the S&P 500. The structural advantages that REITs enjoy are the reason why they've outperformed over the last 40 years, and they're not going away. And that's why we believe that they will continue to outperform over the next 30 years, and they're a better risk-adjusted investment than going into the S&P 500.